My pleasure. Professor Inderjit Singh, please, the floor is yours.
Very good morning, and thank you for all of you who are here today. I would like to share the experiences that we had in Singapore and in the Asian region. Hopefully, this will be something that can get us thinking about what the rest of us can do in our own ecosystems. Now, when we think about innovation and entrepreneurship, we always look at the Silicon Valley as the gold standard. Government officials, journalists, entrepreneurs, startups, ecosystem players have all gone down there to study, to see how they can become the Silicon Valley. And many countries came to realize that the chase to recreate Silicon Valley in an environment and culture that's completely different is futile. So after a few years of trying to create a Silicon Valley in Singapore, we gave that up and decided to look at the elements of what succeeded and to create our own ecosystem that could create a success in our own culture and in our own environment. And so this is what, with the few things that we looked at. What are the key ingredients that can create a successful ecosystem? Of course, the first is entrepreneurs, individuals who can build the businesses based on customer needs. And therefore, countries like Korea and Singapore, being small, we are much smaller than the Korea. We always invite entrepreneurs from any part of the world to come to Singapore and use our ecosystem to start up. So without entrepreneurs, the whole game is lost. Of course, the other important element are the industries and the corporations. We talk about the triple helix. This is another element that they become the catalyst of support of small and medium enterprises. Nowadays, they have their own venture funds that support companies, but they could also be the customers to test out new technologies and new products and services that are put up by the startups and the new companies. Of course, the other important element is government. Government, in most cases, in most countries, become an obstacle and not the help in entrepreneurs because of the rules and regulations that make it difficult. This is also something that all governments around the world have been trying to address to see how they can change the rules and regulations so that it become more conducive. And my 20 years in Parliament in Singapore, I focus a lot on this area because I faced a lot of difficulties when I started my companies. And therefore, I spent 20 years in Parliament trying to change the rules and regulations so that it becomes easier for future entrepreneurs. The other very important element which you've been hearing throughout all our discussion, money, funding. And so having investors and angels like all of us here is going to be a very important part of a good ecosystem. And so how to do that? How do we attract angels into our own ecosystem? And the final element that we found that was very important that many of us tend to ignore are the educational institutions, the universities particularly, where there's a lot of good research done, a lot of research money is poured into these universities. What is the outcome? And this is also a place where we have faculty students, where we have an opportunity in an environment where we can train, we can teach about entrepreneurship, we can share knowledge that can then allow them to create successes when they leave. So we have been building such an ecosystem since 1999 in Singapore. And so we looked at all of these things, and we have strengthened in all the areas, whether it is investors, and I'm going to talk about some of these things. Of course, what is successful in Singapore may not be successful in other ecosystems, but I would suggest that you look at the elements that I talk about and try to use this and see how you can bring them together to make it successful. Now, our innovation growth has been backed by entrepreneurial leaders and government support. And so after 1999, when we started, we formed an organization called the Action Community for Entrepreneurship. This was a partnership between government and private sector. And I was heading this for a while, together with the minister, to bring all the people together, and then we worked on policy changes. When we got together, we trusted one another. When we were not together, the government did not trust the entrepreneurs. You're out to make money. Entrepreneurs did not believe in the government because they did not help them. When we got together, we solved many problems together. So this is something that was very important for us to then focus on the investors portion, on the money portion, on the university portion, education portion. And so we managed to do many changes at that point of time. What has been the outcome of all of this? Yesterday, or the first day, in one of the presentations, Singapore was ranked 14 in the startup genome in the world in terms of the innovation ecosystem. this did not happen by chance. We basically focus on those elements that I talked about, and one of the thing that the startup genome identifies important is local connectedness as one of the strongest. What is connectedness? The connection between all of those elements, the universities, the investors, entrepreneurs, government, and so on. This has been the strength that they identified for us, and this has helped us create many more startups and create the jobs. And the opportunities continue to be tremendous. We are ranked number one in deep tech startup in artificial intelligence research in Singapore. In fact, our university, NTU, where I come from, we've got lots of research money from industry. Alibaba, for example, opened up the first ever research center outside China. We are the first university in the world to get. So we get that kind of funding, and that will then fuel the future startups in our ecosystem. In the area of financing, today we have been able to attract US $30 billion of asset under management. This was a study done by AVCJ in 2018. And this has therefore helped us create many more opportunities for businesses, because now when I started in my panel discussion, I mentioned I could not find money in Singapore, I had to go overseas. We have brought this money into Singapore, not by chance, because the government gave a lot of incentives to VCs, to angel investors, to bring your funds from overseas, based in Singapore, and then you can invest in companies in Singapore, or invest in companies in other parts of the world. 30% of your money that you put in Singapore must be invested in Singapore companies. And by the way, we don't just bring the funds, the government matches the fund. So we created a fund where you bring $1 billion, the government put in $1 billion with you. And then we take the equity, joint equity together. So this has actually completely changed the whole landscape in Singapore, and this has also spurred first the VCs, then the angel investors, and so on. Now, what are the role of angel investors in the ecosystem? I believe that it's important that we talk about this, because it's it's a very different form of financing compared to VCs or other form of bank financing and so on. And the significant wisdom of an investor could be in differentiating factor in the success or failure of a startup. And the angel investor, when he invests, or he or she invests, puts in a lot of effort in mentoring and guiding and so on, compared to many other forms of investment. And this is something that actually is in not just Singapore, but in Southeast Asia was very far behind. The angel investing community in Southeast Asia was very far behind compared to US and many parts of the world. And this is something that I talked about in 2018 when I was here in the conference. But since then, the whole ecosystem has boomed in Southeast Asia, and because it is become a buzzword, angel investors. And in terms of deal in Asia Pacific, the deal value rose to $165 billion US dollars in 2018, exceeding an all-time high of $159 billion a year earlier, and 48% greater than the period of 2013 to 2017. So this is a big thing. By 2018, the dry powder in the Asia Pacific region had risen to $317 billion, or 3 years of future supply of the current pace of investment. This implies that there is significant funding that's going around. But the problem now we face, in the past we had startups that could not find money. Now we have a lot of money, but we cannot find startups. So therefore, you can bring all the money, the other part of the ecosystem, if you don't have the entrepreneurs, you're also not going to succeed. If you don't have the universities producing the technologies, you also may not succeed. If government is not going to play this part, we won't succeed. So now we are facing, especially in Singapore, we're very small, we find that we have a shortage of entrepreneurs. And Korea is giving incentives, France is giving incentives, Malaysia is giving. Why would they come to Singapore? So the governments, people who represent government here, you need to think about how now you're going to attract, because the whole world is attracting. By the way, China is attracting the similar talents, and they are huge, and they've got a lot of firepower. In Singapore itself, I talked about Asia Pacific, the asset under management survey done by our government, has registered a good expansion of 5.4% to 3.4 trillion, or US Singapore dollar, or 2.5 trillion Singapore dollars. And we continue to serve as a global Asia gateway for asset managers for investors to tap the region opportunity. Why is it so much? 2.5 trillion is because of the incentives that we give them. And I mentioned that they don't have to invest in Singapore. If the requirement is to invest in Singapore, we don't have startups. So, but we bring them then, what it creates for us was a vibrant environment. So many of them, it creates a vibrant environment. Now, given all of this funding, why is it that the common dilemma that startup face is a lack of ability to secure seed funding and then to go into following ground? Is there a risk aversion, and perhaps more importantly, the startups are not able to articulate clearly what the investor seeks to hear from the investment language? And this is something that we need to know that is coachable, is trainable. And I mentioned that one of the work plan items we want to do is to help both sides of the community, the startup understand what the investors want, and the investors to understand and what the startups want, and then match them. The mistake all of us made, and I've been doing this for many years, 20 years, in trying to find the right formula, was to match them straight away. There's an investor and there's a startup, let's put together and you talk. And it never connects. So you have to prepare both sides, especially the startups. Speak the language. And prepare the investors, understand what you're going in for. Then you increase the success rate. And this is something that the reason why Singapore went from around bottom of the table to 14 in ranking is because we did all of this thing. We started very early on. And so this is something that we as angel investors can do. We can coach, we can come up with programs. And the World Business Angel Forum, we are doing the business school. And through the business school, we're going to do practical things, not academic things that university teach, but practical things that will prepare startups to go and find success. So there's a lot of money floating around. During my time, there was not enough. And we did this in the last few years. And today, when entrepreneurs in Singapore come to me and tell me, I cannot find money and I cannot find funding, it's a terrible environment. So I told them, no, there's a lot of money. The reason you cannot find money, the problem is not with the funders, but the problem is with you. You don't have a good team, you don't have a good plan, you are not able to present yourself. So look at yourself, change yourself before you go and assess the financing again. So I think this is a very important thing. Now, so now I'm at Singapore, and I come down to the university in NTU. In NTU, what we did was to handle the whole entrepreneurship and the startup ecosystem and technology transfer. We do a lot of research in NTU. Was to, instead of making the activity of technology transfer, licensing, startup, spin-off, a department in NTU, we created a separate company. We call it NTU TIF. I'm chairman of the board of NTU TIF. Now we think like a private company, not like a university or a government department. When we are a university, now we look at how we can create many more startups, how we can create many more licensing deals, how we can help our startups raise funds. So we operate like a private company. And so this has been the focus for since I started this company for NTU 6 years ago. And we are making very good progress. Now, Singapore is a small ecosystem. So the next thing that I'm focusing on for NTU TIF is to build a regional network of ecosystem. And I talked a bit about it in some of my presentation earlier on, is how can we as a Singapore ecosystem hook up with a Korean ecosystem, and ecosystem to ecosystem, we have a bunch of investors, entrepreneurs down here, and we have a bunch of investor entrepreneurs. An investor in Korea may want to invest in a startup in Singapore, but they cannot meet because we are not linked up. So if we can create the ecosystem to ecosystem linkages, and I think this is something WBF can play a useful role, immediately we create a separate, bigger opportunity around the world. And if all the ecosystem players around the world can connect this way, then I think we will have a greater chance of success, matchmaking and connecting the right investors to the right companies. And in NTU, we have great technology. We do technology. We have zero farming. Every food stuff in Singapore is imported from overseas. But we have very good research in food technology. We cannot use this. If I can connect with a country that needs this food technology, I will bring the technology from Singapore to your region. So this is another reason why this connectivity is very important. So recently we went to Vietnam, to Indonesia, different cities in Indonesia and Thailand. And we are working with ecosystem players, and we see they are trying to do something in the farms. They need IoT technology, they need monitoring tech, they need artificial intelligence, but they don't have it. They're using old system, but we have it all. So we are bringing these things to those ecosystem so that the startups down there can use our technology. So the opportunities are tremendous if, let's say, all of us can get our ecosystems linked up together. and I think we need a platform, and WBF could be that platform that we want to do. So, in summary, I would like to say that we in Singapore, we were economy fully dependent on foreign direct investment. We did not have an entrepreneurial economy. We had a very good infrastructure thanks to good government leaders. We were cheap at one time, but we are very expensive today. And we will not be able to attract the kind of foreign direct investments anymore. We realized this 20 years ago. And I was part of the team in government that realized this, and we decided to transform our economy from a foreign direct investment multinational to a startup economy, entrepreneurial economy. We focused on the ecosystem. We brought in the right players. We made it easier for entrepreneurs to come to Singapore. We made it easier for VCs and for angel investors to come to Singapore. We pumped every year. We pump about $5 billion to $6 billion US into our research in all the universities and the research institutes. Government started changing rules. In my 3 years that I headed a committee looking at rules, we eliminated or changed 2,000 rules in government so that it's easier for companies to do business. So we address every aspect of those areas, and today we have made that progress. So for any governments and any ecosystem in the world, address these fundamental issues. The way I could change rules in Singapore, you may not be able to change it in Mali. But you must know how you can change the rules in Mali, your way, and then change it for the benefit. To do that, you need people who are championing this, who understand everything. So a person who understands what the entrepreneur needs, a person who understands what the government is looking for and what the investor is looking for. These are the key people that we need, each one of us need to develop in our individual ecosystem if we want to create success the way that Singapore has created. So I really hope that we all can, as a global community, make change in the world. If you want sustainable development, this is the way. An entrepreneurial economy, and then empower everyone. If they have the capability, give them the opportunity. And together we can create that success. Thank you.